I went into business initially more out of a trauma response and more out of a need to prove myself and prove my worth than I realized at the time. That can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing. You need to really start to understand, like, how are you valuing yourself? Where did you learn that? Like, something that I like to talk about in performance coaching is, my opinion is, there is no such thing.
Welcome to Swift Coaches Academy, a podcast dedicated to bringing health and wellness professionals the uncensored truth behind what it really takes to succeed in the health industry with me, your host, Nadia Wood. As an accredited exercise physiologist and business owner for almost a decade, I'm on a mission to transform the lives of ambitious health professionals like you who want more and are ready to take action to create incredible impact in your careers and unlock financial freedom in your business. So join me as I speak candidly with industry leaders about the struggles and successes from within the trenches through thought-provoking conversations. Welcome back. Another episode today. I'm so pumped to have an incredible woman who we only recently connected, but big impact on me and made me sort of second guess and have to be like, oh, am I doing some of those things? So I thought that if I'm perhaps needing some support and I can use and abuse this hour or so as a little bit of like self-help as well as helping others, then why not? So Nadia Zekaria, very cool name. We love a woman with a great name. How are you going?
I'm great, thank you. And yes, it was great meeting you the other day. I feel like we both had very like big personalities, so it's always cool when like two big personalities work rather than clash, which I feel like can sometimes happen, especially with women in business. So it was cool to just see everyone be like straight in and be friendly and like, you know, stuff like this to come up straight away. It's always really cool.
Yeah, I love it. I've actually been finding, and maybe it's just like, I guess, the vibe attracting your tribe, but I've actually been finding so many incredible like female boss bitches in my circle and just expanding that. And I love to see the collaborative rather than competitive space that is coming up and being like creating opportunities out of this sort of stuff. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with like how you handle it as well. Even if someone maybe comes in with that energy, I feel like when you do sort of like what you did, which is like you're so friendly and you kind of like point out what you like about the person, you're like, oh, hey, I'd love to have you on my podcast or whatever. You're kind of feeding into that other person and validating them as well. So I think sometimes when that energy can come up, we can automatically sort of go, oh, you know, and retract and perpetuate the problem. Whereas I feel like because you would be so open, you probably, even if someone's maybe coming with some of that energy, you're probably shifting it, which is super cool.
It's so interesting. It just reminds me, I had a chat in the DMs. I was like inviting someone onto my podcast and he was like, oh, well, like you're a competitor to me, like instantly like got really defensive. And I kind of like diffused the situation. I was like, no, like I'd love to collaborate. He was like, cool. And then I sent him another message with like his name and a question mark being like, oh, like you said yes, like what's the go? And he sent me this message back that was like, to be honest, I was like really rubbed the wrong way by you just sending me that message with my name. And I was like, this is not a human that I want to collaborate with anyway. Like, if you're going to get triggered or like low key, what if you want to quote unquote triggered by that, I'm like, bro, this is absolutely not the vibe. So, yeah, I just found it really interesting. And in the past, I
Yeah.
probably would have maybe like taken that a little more personally, but I feel like I'm at a point now where I'm like, you know what? That says a lot about you and a whole lot of nothing about me because I was just following up and the way I followed up didn't like vibe with you. Like,
Yeah. He was loaded from the beginning. And yeah, that is one of the look, I feel like you probably get that anywhere. Like, especially in Australia, like tall poppy syndrome, I think is unfortunately quite a common thing. But especially I think when you get into business, there can definitely be a bit of that, you know. I probably funnily find it more like sometimes if I have friends or people that aren't in business and I am, that there can kind of start to be this sort of rift between you guys because they don't like that you're in business, almost like maybe because that there's a part of them that wanted to do that and they haven't done it. So it kind of coming up more in that space than with other business owners per se. But again, like you said, it could be like vibe attracting your tribe. And now that I'm in this stage of my life with business owners, you're kind of more those kind of people that are open to collaborating are sort of more in your circle.
mm, yeah. Interesting. Anyway, let's dive into who you are and the value that you have to share today. So I'm gonna do a brief intro, and then I'm gonna get you to like go into like how you came about into all of this. But performance coach, very like mindset driven, from a HR background, doing that for ages, and then sort of now working for yourself in terms of performance coaching, which I feel like is this almost like this new coaching thing that's popped up. It's like not quite mindset. It's not quite like there's a bit of a blend. So talk to me about like what that means to you and how you got there.
Okay, so I guess what I like to say is I work with business owners, athletes, and everyday people who are trying to optimize their lives for whatever their definition of success is. And I think the reason why I tended towards the word performance, because like you said, it's not just mindset, it's not just emotions, it's just not just habits. It's sort of looking at the person, and the word holistic is quite bastardized, right? You like these days, but it is the right word to use. So please don't just check out when I say it. But a genuinely holistic approach to the person. So I'm not a business coach. I'm not really looking at their numbers and stuff like that necessarily, but we're looking at, how they look after themselves physically and mentally, how they show up at work, how they interact with people, how they organize their time, how they behave in their relationships, how they, what mindsets they take on, how they regulate their emotions, sort of that wide range of things. And I think my superpower in the space is because of the range of experience that I'll go into in a minute, just based on my life experience and then the studies that I've done, I'm kind of uniquely placed to actually be able to talk into all of those topics. So that's what I really enjoy doing, is like looking at the whole person. And a lot of the time, I'm working with, for example, with athletes and business owners, they're already very good at their craft. The real estate agent doesn't need to tell me, I don't need to tell him how to sell a house. I don't have to tell the lawyer how to read the law or the sports person how to fight MMA, but I do help them realize how all the other aspects of how they are and where they may or may not be nurturing and serving themselves is actually playing out like on the field, and in terms of how I got here, very long story, but I'll try to tell it in a succinct manner, which is essentially, I like to say I grew up in a spicy environment, because I think the word trauma is overused a little bit these days, but there was definitely probably some of that sort of sprinkled through there. And as a result of my mum having really serious mental health issues, my dad is a Muslim immigrant from Afghanistan. So you can imagine just sort of like the transition issues that come with being like a first generation Australian growing up in a really strict Muslim family, my mum having really serious mental health issues. I had a lot of personal struggles, and I like to say that the questions that plague your mind guide your life. And there was a question for me growing up, which was very much like, why do people do this? Why do they leave? Why do they act like this? And I think that journey led me into psychology. So I did a psych degree, and again, through that, got a job in HR and started doing that for a good 6 years alongside my degree. And then I sort of started collecting a bunch of different tools, again, predominantly on my journey. So like I started from a more mental health problem sort of space and slowly went on this journey to being in a place where now I would say I'm focusing on optimal performance in my life. And that's sort of the spectrum and the journey that I talk about with clients as well. And, the other things that look like for me was learning a lot about nutrition, about sleep, about your gut and your brain and their relationship, which funnily you don't really learn about at uni back when I went to uni, which is kind of scary. That's part of my issues with a bit of the traditional system, hence why I kind of went down coaching rather than psychology. And then I also got into things like breath work and like meditation, and sort of now combine all that stuff to serve my clients in, like I said, a holistic way, as much as I kind of avoid using that word now because I feel like it's lost its shine.
Yeah, totally. I love that. And coming from that place of a personal story, I feel like just gives that added level of understanding and depth of and breadth as well of knowledge that you have. And it's interesting when you were like, mum and mental health is like, that's actually like a very similar story to me. Like
Yeah, really.
no immigrant parents or anything like that. Both of them are quote unquote Australian, but from from England, all the convict jazz. But yeah, my mum has always had mental health challenges throughout my whole life. And that really, I think, played a big role and impact in, when I reflect on it, for me, it's like part of me was always trying to be the opposite of her. And so I felt like I don't think I've really talked about this much, because I guess it's pretty personal, and but I guess, feeling called to share. So like for me, I feel like mum really plays the self-blame, or the self-blame, but just a victim mentality. And it's just like negative Nelly all the time. And I have like a very small window of like opportunity to be able to be in that space with her. But I just have recognized through my own, support with psychs and things like that over the years, that what started me to be this quote unquote successful, but like just business owner, was like, I will never ever be victim to my feelings, my emotions. I will always just kind of like push them aside, and I will always, just like nothing will get in my way. I will always make sure that, I don't have to ever ask my kids for money like mum did, or like all these different things. It's like I will always, like, to the point where I would like never ask, I don't know, like I saw all these other kids asking their parents to like pick them up from the valley after a night out, or like do all these things, and it's like there's no way in hell that I would do that. I was just like, I will get my own way home. I will sort everything out for myself, because I've just had to since growing up. And I feel like it's kind of leads into what we are talking about just before we started, in terms of like, are the reasons that you got into business the right reasons, and is that from a place of like wounded, or like kind of heal, are you doing that to be this success, or like run away from something, rather than being drawn towards? So I don't know, like what are your thoughts on that, in terms of like, obviously I see now, like that's probably
Yeah.
not serving me now, but it did definitely serve me then. And I do think it, it created me into the person I am today, who's resourceful, who, quote unquote doesn't need anybody, but now also going, fuck, like I do need people.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you for sharing, especially because you said that's not something you've kind of like spoken about before. So I really appreciate that. And I can resonate with almost everything you've said on a personal level as well, which is quite funny. Because we obviously hadn't really had this conversation before now, but it's all kind of coming out. But I think we are a product of our environments, right? And that can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing. Like something that I like to talk about in performance coaching is, my opinion is, there is no such thing as an objective strength or an objective weakness, because a strength can become a weakness at a point, and a weakness can become a strength at a point. And I think you have perfectly demonstrated that in the story you just told. Theoretically, being born to your mother in those circumstances, regardless of the love you might have, or, she did the best with the tools she had available, that in theory could have been a weakness, right? All the other kids have these parents that can be supportive and can be there setting good role models or whatever. So in theory, in that point in your life, that should have been a weakness. You then turn that weakness into a strength, because it's become the reason why you're resilient and self-responsible, and it's driven you into business and all these things. But again, there can become a point where that becomes a weakness. And this is where I can potentially tell some personal story as well. What I sort of, that phenomenon that you're sort of describing, for me, the way that I looked at it was, my mum was an example of a toxic feminine. And a toxic feminine is someone who is swept up in their emotions, who is ruled by them, who doesn't have that ability to get up, get on, to act, to do. And what can happen as a woman is we can then be like, well, no, I don't want to do that. So we become quite masculine, right? Which is exactly what I did as well. And I would agree, I would contribute. I believe I went into business initially more out of a trauma response and more out of a need to prove myself and prove my worth than I realized at the time. Now, that's all played out, and it was a strength, and I get a lot of compliments for being strong and for all being disciplined. But then, as I mentioned on the night that you and I met, when I was 28, I went into complete body burnout, because with a woman who's in her masculine, there are parts of that that aren't natural to our biology. And everyone has a different shelf life of how long they can push that till. But for me, it was at 28 where it became too much. And I actually got really sick. My body shut down. I had brain fog. I had issues with my period. All sorts of really terrible stuff happened. So that strength became a weakness in that moment. And then I had to do the work now to find the balance in between, to change my relationship with how I view emotions and how I view allowing those emotions to take up space and stuff. And I think, again, talking to the listeners, there's, as you mentioned, there's a lot of business owners, there's a lot of like allied health professionals that are listening to this podcast. That is a really good question to ask yourself, like being really honest, why did you go into business? And there's a few reasons that's important. One is the thing that I spoke about is if you're being driven by an unresourceful fuel source, it can be a really good start, but it generally has a shelf life where it stops serving you physically, emotionally, and it stops serving your business. Because again, a common symptom I will see if someone's gone into business for these reasons is when business is good, they're good. When business is bad, they're bad. And when they're not getting sales, they're falling apart, they're getting into overwhelm, they can't get their shit back together, and then the business stays bad, right? Because their worth and value is inherently tied into the business. So in an extreme situation in COVID, I saw this happen to some really close people in my life who, in theory, really successful, come a really long way. COVID, business got taken away. All the money stopped coming in. They absolutely fell apart because it turns out all the mental health issues they had growing up were, they didn't notice that they were still a problem because they were getting constantly validated, especially when you're in a services industry. Oh, you changed my life. You helped me so much. Thank you so much. People are literally adoring you, or they're valuing you, they're paying you money, they're saying thank you. All the parts of you that were wounded are getting fed by your client base, they're getting fed by your sales. And when that got taken away, this person quickly saw that they were not okay, and they actually had to go do all the work. So I often say, I'm really glad my success came after I'd done a lot of my work, because I can see how if my success had come early, I could have thought I was better and I wouldn't have really dealt with it. And I see it a lot with, I think business owners that really, really succeed versus those that don't are those that can see, they understand their business is, yes, an extension of them, but their worth and value is not determined by the success or failure of that business. So therefore, even when times are tough, their prefrontal cortex is still switched on. Whereas if your nervous system is dysregulated in your state, you're in a triggered state, you can lose that ability to critically think, and their business is really negatively impacted by that trauma that's playing out.
I actually, when you were saying that, I actually was like, oh, that was absolutely me, like probably 12 months ago. And I would attach like all of my meaning and worth to whether someone signed up to a program with me, regardless of whether like it was the right program for them or whatever. It was like I would actually recall being like, it would just throw my whole day off. I would feel so emotionally like volatile, and like I would just like not be able to function, honestly, like for such a long period of time. It would impact, how I showed up at home for my partner. It would impact how I showed up with, potentially whatever I had to do for the rest of that day. And I absolutely remember feeling in that state, because I definitely think that, coming back to like, I don't want to be like harp on about like my past or whatever, but I think it gives some context and it provides some understanding. And I think that for all the right reasons, Dad would always be really supportive of me growing up in terms of sport and things like that. But the one thing that I know that he did that Mum did differently was that his first question whenever I finished like a basketball game was like, did you win? And so I was validated, and he would have like my certificates and he would show everyone my medals. And so I got, sports person of the year and Queensland volleyball and like captain of this. And like, so I was rewarded for that. And same with schooling, like I would get good grades and I was rewarded for that. And so I put my self-worth into like my results, not even like the effort that I put in, but actually just the actual freaking outcome that sometimes is not totally within our control. And
Sure.
just seeing that, you know, my self-worth was so fucking tied to if someone signed up for a program, because I would take, you know, you see people who are like, yeah, take radical responsibility and like everything you can change. And it's, you know, what could you have done better? And I think I took that to such an extreme that I was like, well, it's my fault. This person didn't sign up. And therefore, you know, like I'm not good enough and I'm not worthy. It's not, you know, this wasn't a good fit, or like, hey, you can improve on these things.
Yeah.
I
How
think
did
it's
you
so
change that? I'm
hard.
curious. What did you do in the last year that started to help that evolve?
Well, I've been starting to work with a life/business coach who does a lot of like neurolinguistic programming stuff, who's also quite a good friend of mine. I think that was a huge part of it. And then I think it's also just recognizing and acknowledging that like sometimes they genuinely, and this may be like rarer, but like sometimes they genuinely can't afford it, or sometimes it's like genuinely not the right time, or sometimes there's going to be instances where it's like it's not a good fit and you probably should, like it's almost a blessing in disguise when you're in, I think I've been in those moments where it's like you take on the client because you need them and you know that you can help them to a degree, but like can you help them all the way? And I definitely, hand on heart, like there have been times in the past where I haven't fully felt like I can like 100%. And I'm like, let's give it a crack because I need some
Yeah.
fucking money in my bank account or whatever. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure, you know, people are probably thinking like, fuck, that's been me too. And I hope that by sharing that, that helps you feel a little less alone and a little less shit, because I think, you know, it's really hard to be like, I'm the saint who never takes a dollar from anyone, who I, you know, can't help 110%. I don't know if that is real.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess so some work with my life coach supporting me through that sort of stuff, and then just sort of sitting back and going like, hey, what is the actual fucking situation here? And is this like this sort of how you were saying, like your business is an extension of you, but your business is not you. And I definitely still catch myself in moments with this, but I've gotten much better as to like,
Yeah.
this is, you know, that this is what happened. What can I change? What can I do? And
Yeah.
what am I willing to do? Like the other day I was, this morning, sorry, I got on a call with someone. She was saying, you know, like literally, I really fucking want this. I need this. The only thing is the finances. And so I was like, cool, like, can we workshop like an extended payment plan? Very happy to work something out with you. Would this work? And in the past, I would have been like, this is the go. If you can't do it, then sorry.
Yeah.
And then would have also been like, oh, it's still my fault. As
Yeah.
opposed to like, I guess I'm just a little more creative in my options now and being like, if you really need this and I really see that you're an aligned client, then I'm happy to figure out something so you can
Yeah.
get some sort of support rather than nothing.
Yeah. So you're something you referred to there, it's like cognitive flexibility, right? Like one of the highest predictors of success and good mental health and performance, in my opinion, is cognitive flexibility, right? And being able to see that there's more than one way to do this thing, that I am not inherently based on this, like that. People that are very fixed and very rigid are far less able to grow, and they're also more likely to be dissatisfied and to struggle with their mental health. So I think that flexibility aspect's really cool. And interestingly, if this is something that you struggle with, if you're kind of like, oh, okay, you guys have like tapped on something here and I'm maybe haven't realized it before, or maybe I have and I don't really know how to do what to do about it, in terms of I can see that my value is kind of worked in on my business. You need to really start to understand, like you described, you learned that your value, when it was very clear that dad did this, so I learned outcomes was how I was valuable, right? So that's really the first step, is understanding like, how are you valuing yourself? Where did you learn that? And I have a free program called Becoming Savage. And the very first episode, it's like a podcast, like plug and play sort of thing that you can just listen to. And the first episode is about honesty and being really, really honest with yourself and with others. And it asks a lot of these questions around like, where you lie, where you struggle with honesty, like what parts of you like to lead with versus what parts of you do you like to kind of put behind you. And that episode in particular, I think for someone that's seeing this play out would be a good place to start. And like you said, working with a professional that can help you, looking at somatic things like breath work or yin yoga are some really accessible ways that you can also sort of start to work through that stuff. But it definitely starts with like that awareness of, well, how am I valuing myself? Where did I learn that? Where do I have value outside of my business? And how can I start treating my business as an extension of me, but also realizing it is not me, and taking steps to create all of that, which probably looks like boundaries with when you start and stop work, actually having hobbies and relationships that exist outside of your business, you know, and even just actually looking into the idea of like growth versus fixed mindset. Like I listened to an Andrew Huberman episode where he goes into this, and they talked about like this study, and the main difference is when a fixed person makes a mistake, they get stuck in that moment blaming themselves and feeling bad about the mistake. A person with a growth mindset sees the mistake and immediately goes to, what in my situation created this mistake so that I can do something differently? And that time that you lose in making it about you is what actually makes you a loser. It's not the loss itself. It's the way that you can't let go of the loss, and then you beat yourself up for being a loser, which makes you the loser. And this is, again, a very, very common thing I see, whether you want to call it mental fitness, mental health, or performance, is the thing we fear, we create, right? You're afraid you're a loser, so you kick yourself for losing, you become a loser. You know, you're afraid you're not going to get a client. You're coming from a place of scarcity. So you're all insecure in the meeting and you don't back yourself and you aren't confident. So you lose the sale. You're scared your partner's going to leave you or that you're going to get cheated on. So you start acting like a psycho that then makes them feel not trusted. And then maybe they actually leave you or cheat on you, you know?
Yeah. So interesting. And I feel like, you know, I think sometimes this lends itself to the conversation of like manifestation. And I think sometimes that can get a little bit like definitely woo woo for my liking, in terms of like, I'm going to lay in my bed and just like manifest $1 million. And it's like, no, like you need to obviously put in the work for that and uh, take the action of someone. But I am seeing more evidence of showing up in the ways that of who we want to become and are becoming, and reinforcing those positive things. I think maybe something else that um has helped me in those moments when I felt like my self-worth was tied to, let's say, a sale, is also and I feel like this is something everyone should do, is like have a little like folder on my computer of like all of the screenshots of the lovely things that my clients have said about me, and just come back to that and go, you know what, like I may have fucked up with this one client, and I may have actually, you know, not done as much as I could, or maybe there was something where it was misaligned or whatever. And that was a fuck up, or that's a mistake. But then going like, hey, there are actually people who I have really fucking helped, and I've supported them, and like that is so meaningful and helps to reaffirm that, you know, one person or one sale is not it doesn't need to be wrapped up in like my identity.
Yeah. Fig jam folder. Fuck, I'm good. Just ask me.
I'm gonna rename mine.
Big fan of the fig jam folder. And another thing my coach used to get us to do when we were having those moments is go and read those things out to yourself in the mirror. It adds another layer to it. And then another activity on that, which I often talk to clients about, is David Goggins talks about the cookie jar. So sitting down and writing a list of every single moment in your life where you thought you weren't going to be able to do something and you did it, every accomplishment, everything you've ever had to feel proud of, make it a list and keep adding it. It might actually, in some people, if you're more of a visual person, it's an actual jar. They're like a jar full of post-it notes that they add to and they do. And then when you're having a day and you're not backing yourself before you go on the sales call, pull a cookie out of the jar and have a snack before you get on your call. So you're like extra pumped with that self-esteem stuff, you know. And yeah, like that's all a big part of, again, kind of circling back to what I do and how I help clients, is a lot of this stuff, like helping them build awareness of themselves, helping them see where they've got weaknesses or where they've got gaps that aren't serving them, and help give them really practical tools like the cookie jar and all that stuff to help them start plugging those holes so they have something to do in the moment. I think, again, like something that can be lacking with psychologists or some of the more like spiritual coaches is it's very like fluffy. It's very like mindset and talking for an hour, but they can miss that very like practical element. And I just think that the way the human mind works, that practical aspect is what you really need in order to integrate a change and to actually like build that. People say build your self-esteem all the time. How the fuck do you do that? How do I become more sure of I remember someone saying that. I'm like, how, brother? I know who I am. I know my good and my bad. What do you want me to do? Like, I don't understand, And I really have put it on myself to go and find practical ways when someone wants to be like more regulated, wants to build their self-esteem, wants to be more productive, wants to be more confident, that I have a tool and library of resources that I help people with. And then cross-pitching into another thing. So I run an online community called The Revolution. And the premise of that community is a lot of this stuff, this idea that there's all of these tools that exist that I have spent over 10 years sourcing from a bajillion different people and a bajillion different experts and piecing them all together to make it work. And all these books, because my love and my passion is personal development. So what I do for fun and what I do for work most of the time is just like compulsively absorbing this information and kind of like turning all of those things into this hub of resources. And I guess something that my brain's always been very good at is like, you and I can have a conversation on a concept and then I can go make an activity to support that. Like that's something my brain has always really been able to do. So that portal and that online community has been a way for me to just like house all of those resources in one place for people to utilize, which is pretty cool.
It is. It's awesome. I think like there's so much in this, right? So I think the question I have for you is, how do you find these holes and where do we start?
So how would I recommend a person finds that within themselves? Is that the question?
Yeah, or even if you were to start working with someone one-on-one, like what are the first things you do to uncover these holes? And then looking at like the 6 holes that they have or whatever, like how do you prioritize and actually get moving?
Yeah, so the way that I literally do it is I have a very, very long questionnaire as a starting place, and it has very tactical questions covering all different aspects of your life, trying to reveal those gaps to me. So what I kind of say to someone is, you want to audit your existence, right? So something that you could do if you wanted to do it from home as a starting place is look up the Wheel of Life. So the Wheel of Life is this, I don't know if you've heard of it before, but it just breaks down like all the categories that sort of exist in terms of, career, finances, relationship, hobbies, whatever. It's broken down, right? So it's some of what I do is based off that idea. I kind of going through and asking questions under every single one of those categories, going through it and asking yourself, well, out of 10, how am I rated? If 10 was the best I could possibly be, and I would have nothing more that I wanted in my life, and 0 was I'm a freaking piece of shit and Lord help me, then where am I sitting? And do that for every single one. And then go through for everyone and ask yourself why. Why is that one good? Why is that one bad? What would I have to do to get that to a 10? What would I have to do to get that to a 10? And then try to start doing it and notice where do you get stuck. Whatever goal, even without that, right now, tell me what goals do you have? And then tell me why have you not reached them? Specifically, what is it in how you behave, how you react, how you feel, how you think that gets in your way of executing that, right? So for example, for me, the other day, because I'm always auditing myself, I was kind of doing a little bit of an audit and I was like, more or less everything came down to I need to have better time management, right? Like I'm not unproductive, but to get to this next place with all these different goals that I have, the main thing is not having enough time to put into them. I can't create more time, but I can get better at managing my time, right? And the other thing as well is like first looking at your goals and then also looking at all the places where you've been upset, angry, frustrated recently, and ask yourself again, what did you do to get yourself in that circumstance? And it doesn't mean it's your fault, going into what you said earlier. There's a difference between personal responsibility and blame, but there's understanding that, for example, the client that you didn't get, is it because you've actually been putting out the wrong type of marketing? You're not talking to the right type of client, therefore you're attracting the wrong type of client, right? So really like kind of looking at that space and just asking questions and becoming like someone who regularly journals. someone who regularly has white space in their calendar. And what I mean by that is time where you do nothing. Because in that time and space, you actually get some opportunity to catch yourself, right? Because I think about it this way: if you just go every second of the day, the most you can be is in that moment, maybe processing the moment before, maybe planning for the next. But to really kind of audit on a deeper level, you have to have that space to actually be like, what have I been doing? What's been going well? What hasn't? Why? Where did it go wrong? Where did it go right? What relationships are expanding me? What are making me retract? What's making me feel physically good? What's making me feel emotionally good, right? So there is a myriad of really like deep questions that you can get into that can be helpful. But honestly, if you go deep enough on just these 3 questions, how do I feel physically? How do I feel mentally and emotionally? And how do I feel spiritually? And if you're not spiritual, then how do I feel? How aligned do I feel to my greater goals? And then you just ask yourself why for each of those 3 points. You will pretty much find everything if you go deep enough on just those basic questions. Because if you look at how good or bad you're feeling and you really inspect how each of those 3 components are going, you're always going to catch where the holes are and also what's really working, so you can double down on what's really working. Because it's not just plugging the holes that's important. It's knowing where your strengths are and doubling down and putting your energy into those strengths, as opposed to trying to distribute your energy equally everywhere and never really getting anywhere.
I feel like that's huge in terms of, like, a lot of people have all these goals and all these big goals in every area of your life. And so do you just get them to go like, hey, what's most important? Where do we start? Or is there something that you a little bit more sophisticated?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways I do it. One, I definitely look at values for sure.
Yeah.
Like I look at what you value and like based on your values, which of these should go first. I also sometimes just look at like, where are you, like what's the lowest rating and what's the highest rating? Because sometimes even if something's not important to you, like health maybe doesn't matter to you. But if you let that get low enough, everything else is fucked. So sometimes you do just have to look how low is a certain number and is it time to focus there, even though it's not necessarily super high value. But generally it's sort of like a values determination and like, well, what is your long-term goal and what do they, but also sometimes what do I think is most impactful? Because a lot of the time someone, like the story that comes to mind for me is I had this athlete that I worked with. And he used to just kind of drop in every once in a while because I used to allow that with clients. I used to allow kind of just random sessions, a bit more like a psychologist. And we were focusing on why his golf game wasn't good and why he was having a lot of trouble with performance anxiety and whatever. And we didn't have a tremendous amount of success until he signed up properly. He signed up properly for a 12-week. And in that 12-week, I got him to do all my paperwork. And I realized in that there were so many fundamental health things that he was doing wrong, that there was no way his golf game could be good. So though his goal was to be a better golfer, I actually said he couldn't play golf for a year until he got certain other things correct, because they were the baseline for him to be able to achieve that other goal. So that's also somewhere where I see people let themselves down when they're not working with someone, is what they think is important. They're missing the foundations below that are undoing their success. So again, for business owners, for allied health professionals, your well-being, your nervous system, your physical health, your mental health, maybe that's what's wrong with your business, not your business. So maybe you need a psychologist or a performance coach, maybe more than a business coach right now, or a business coach who knows how to assess and address those more personable aspects of you, you know?
Yeah, fuck. I'm like writing shit down. I just literally was like, just like in my head, I'm like, okay, shit, I need to add to my business academy program, like disc profiling, values, fundamental health, like, are they getting sleep, nutrition? This is fucking great. I really appreciate it. I'm like, I'm changing all this because I've definitely over time created like a huge onboarding, but it's like very specific, like, how do you get leads? What are the systems in your business? What's the money that you make? Like, it is very business oriented. And I think that although I'm not promoting that I'm a mindset or a performance coach, like, you can't fucking not. Like, there has to be an element of that. And I do have NLP training and qualifications and the ability to support people with that. And I
Mhm.
think that, by not at least understanding where they're at and like trying to just jump shit on top of this broken fucking bottom level platform, like they're just
Mm.
gonna crumble. So I
Maybe
totally
we
hear
need to
you.
do some like cross-pollination here, get them into the
Yeah.
revolution while they're working with you. Cause like I said, a lot of that fundamentals is like in that platform that I've created. So, that's what it's about. It's like deconstructing those tools. And then depending on the tool the person needs, it's there. Like, is it the values piece they're missing? Is it the nervous system piece that they're missing? Is it the mummy daddy issues that are playing out in their value around thing? Is that what's missing? And kind of like allowing them to be like, okay, actually, I need that, rather, I need that, as opposed to like a set course that's taking them through a journey is sort of like how I've constructed it.
I love that. I love that. All right, we could probably talk for friggin' hours, but the last thing that I wanted to touch on that you spoke about when we were both speakers at the Health Pro event recently was this thing called the optimal output ratio. And I found this quite interesting, and I love your perspective on it. So could you share that again?
Yeah. So I think I opened with a hypothetical question, which is if tomorrow a research study was released that told you that without a doubt, after a certain amount of work, that your prefrontal cortex would switch off. So that certain amount of work might be 9 hours in a work day or working 6 days in a row, whatever it is. But we found out there was an actual amount of work, which at that point your brain shut down, your prefrontal cortex shut down, you couldn't critically think, but technically you could still keep going. Would you, A, keep doing shit because shit has to get done in the business, knowing full well that you can't critically think and you don't have your higher reasoning on board when you do it? Or would you take a break? Would you rest in the time required? And then would you come back to your business? Right. And then the thing that I went on to say is this is not a hypothetical situation because we all know that hopefully as allied health professionals that when your nervous system is dysregulated, that's exactly what happens. We lose that prefrontal cortex. It can come offline and we lose that ability to higher reason. So as much as we all want to be David Goggins or, Jocko or Hormozy, unfortunately, most of us are not. So as much as we would like to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and as much as that feels like the path to success, the reality is for most people, it is creating diminishing returns. They're actually less productive. They're wasting time. They're making mistakes. They're probably causing some potential reputational damage to their business. And they may, same as in my case, actually burn themselves out. It's not just for old people. As I said, happened to me at 28, in which case really your business suffers. So what I work on with my clients is something that I've coined the optimal output ratio, which is how much work plus how much rest plus how much play is required in order for you to have optimal outputs in your business, in your life, right? And I said it's not about balance. It doesn't have to be only working 8 hours a day and X, Y, Z, but it's understanding for you very personally what amount of those things do you need in order to be at your best. Again, I think the rest and the work aspects sort of go without too much explanation. Like I said, your nervous system needs it, your physical health needs it. It's how you stay recharged, it's how you stay sharp. The work has to happen or nothing happens. But the play part, I think, is, again, something that's not spoken about enough. And the reason why I think that's so important is creativity and innovation comes from that energy. It comes from play. So if you become a business owner who's immaculate at the doing, but you have no creativity, you're not going to scale, you're not going to grow, and you're also probably not going to have a very good time doing any of those things. So it's also looking at your definition of success, right? What's the point of all that money if you fucking hate your life? So I sort of talk about this idea of, what looks like rest for you? What is play for you? What is work for you? And can you play around with the percentage of your day, week, month, year that is allocated to all three of those things so that you're actually operating at your best and getting optimal outputs?
So good. Feel you got like so many rants, and I'm just like sitting here like jaw to the floor. No, I love it. Whew, I feel like I need to take a breath. No, that's awesome. And I think so. The one thing is like, how do I find my optimal output ratio? I'm like, cool, this exists. I get it. I understand. Diminishing returns is happening. Well, how do I now figure out what it is for me?
again, go back to self-awareness that I talked about being important before, and like trial and error, right? So you just have to try it, right? So you might say, okay, I'm going to try to take half a day off. And then you're going to see how you operate. I'm going to take a day off and I'm going to see how I operate. I'm going to see 8 hours sleep, 7 hours sleep, waking up early, going to bed. You just actually have to play around with it. And then at the end of that period, stop and look at what you've produced, look at how you feel, look at what projects you've delivered, and keep playing around with it until you find a balance that works for you. And I think the other thing I like to say is, particularly with play, be mindful that the only play that you have isn't drugs and alcohol, because again, that's a very common thing. Work hard, have a party blowout, work hard, have a party blowout. But again, understanding that you're kind of making all facets worse with that. So especially the play aspect, I think, can be the most challenging as an adult. If you don't have a hobby that's fun, like sport or skateboarding or art or whatever, that's probably one of the most challenging things. You just got to try new things. You got to keep trying new stuff until you find something that you notice is playful for you. You know, for me personally, it looks like working really hard for roughly about a quarter. You know, I usually work 6 days a week for roughly 2 to 3 months, and then I go away for a bigger trip. And on that trip, I usually go somewhere hot, by the water, by the beach, and I just have a lot of like flow and open space in my calendar. There's often no phone. I sort of operate more under that hard work, deep rest and deep play, as opposed to trying to find the balance in every week. But again, you know, and this is a thing I find, unfortunately, we want someone to give us an answer. And when we're not given that answer black and white, we often will put it in the too hard basket and go back to just listening to the last TikTok video. But I also say that if that is you, I guess what? How many TikTok videos have you gone through and you still have the same fucking problems? The only person that has the answer is you. Personal development is part art, part science. The science is all the scientific research that's available on things that are really fantastic for your physical, mental health, and optimization. The art is a deep understanding of who you are, your strengths, your weaknesses, and how you can utilize the science in order to get optimal outputs for you. So you really have to be willing to just like pen and paper, you are the researcher and the research topic.
I love that. So I feel like that might be a helpful thing to finish on in terms of like actionable items. I definitely think and would recommend everyone go and sign up. We'll drop stuff in the show notes in terms of the link for your Becoming Savage, which I just fucking love the title. I feel like we're very in sync and like on a similar wavelength. So that's
I
it.
agree.
So definitely, like, the worst that could happen is you get some information that may or may not help you, and the best thing that could happen is that you fucking change your life. So you know, like, the pros and the cons, kind of weigh that shit up. Not too
100%.
hard. But like, one tradition that I do finish on with these podcasts that I'd love to extend the question to you is, based on what we've spoken about today, if someone's like, holy shit, so much information, sounds great, where do I start? What is one thing that they can take away and start to take action on to help them move forward?
Yeah. So the one thing that I think foundationally will serve every other suggestion and thing we've spoken about today is to start every day journaling, or mentally journaling would be better, but if not journaling, mentally asking yourself those 3 questions, which was, how do I feel physically? How do I feel mentally and emotionally? How aligned am I feeling to my goals and my values? And why? And I think if you do that really deeply and consistently, you will naturally find you will find why you're in business. You will find what that's being fed by. You will find your optimal output ratio. All those things will come from that deep relationship with yourself and deep curiosity about how you are feeling.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you so much. I feel like I've taken some notes. I'm shifting what I'm doing. I feel like, you know, I felt a little bit seen today, which is not a bad thing. Where can people continue to absorb the world of Nadia?
Yeah. So on Instagram, it's just at nadia.sophia.coaching. My website is also www.nadiasophiacoaching.com. You'll find access to Savage, to my online content, to my online community, to my one-on-ones. All of that stuff is there. So please follow along to improve your performance.
Love that. Awesome. Have
Thank
a
you for having
fantastic.
me.
Yeah, of course. And I feel like we're gonna dive deep and watch this space. Maybe there's some collabs in the play.
I look forward to that.
Bye.
Bye.
Just a quick reminder before you go, that link is waiting for you in the show notes if you are a health coach who is in business looking to grow or scale. We have options for both, and I am super excited to be working with a few individuals next year who are ready to take their business to the next level. If that sounds like you, chuck down and have a look at the show notes, and you can apply through there, and I will talk to you one-on-one and we can figure out if this is right for you. I cannot wait to chat.
I have a tiny favor to ask of you, and that is to just hit that subscribe button if you have not done it yet. If you've made it this far, then I hope that this has been valuable for you and for us to get more incredible guests in front of your earlobes and faces. If you're watching us on YouTube, then please do that now. And if you have any feedback or suggestions for me, or something that was a golden nugget that really stood out to you in this episode, I would absolutely love if you flicked me a message over on Instagram at Xenia Wood Official. Until next episode, and in whatever you do, move swiftly.